Alright, so in this video we're going to go over lessons 7.4 and 7.6 quiz. And just like other quizzes, remember the order of the questions is randomized, so the order of your questions will probably be different from the order of mine. But for this one, deals with that graph wiggliness theorem, that theorem that states if we want to figure out the least possible degree or the lowest possible degree a polynomial has, we draw a horizontal line, and wherever it hits the most points of the graph, that is the smallest degree the graph can be. So if I were to draw a horizontal line right here through those points, it would go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parts of that graph. So the lowest possible degree for this one would be that it's got to be at least a degree of 7. Alright, so for this one, some of you guys got hung up on this 3. Okay, remember we only get a 0 from x's. Okay, so we would have a 0 from the x plus 12. We'd have a 0 from the x minus 8. This 3, though, does not have an x, so it does not give us a 0. Okay, so the 3 does not do anything. So what we would do, though, is we would set the fractors. So the x plus 12, I'd set that equal to 0 and solve it, in which case I'd get negative 12. Whoops. So it would be negative 12 with a multiplicity of 3, because the exponent there is 3. This x minus 8, if I set that equal to 0, I would get positive 8. And it's squared, so it has a multiplicity of 2. All right, so for this one, we're trying to figure out what the value for a would be in this equation for if the equation had a y-intercept of negative 150. Remember, that means that if you put 0 in for x, you'd get an answer of negative 150. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I put 0 in for each of those x's, I'd have 0 minus 3, or negative 3. 0 plus 5 would be 5, and 0 plus 2 would be 2. So if I put 0 in there for those x's, we know the y-intercept would be negative 150. So I'm going to solve this equation for a. Well, negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, times 2 is negative 30. So we'd have a times negative 30 equals negative 150. So to solve for a, I would just divide both sides by negative 30, and that would give me 5 as my answer. So we know the value of a would just be 5. Okay, so here we know the zeros of a polynomial are negative 3, 1, and 2. Give a possible equation for the function in factored form. So it doesn't matter what order you put these in, as long as we just don't want to put any spaces in here. But one of the zeros is at negative 3, so that would be x plus 3 would be the factor. Another 0 would be 1, so it would be x minus 1 would be that factor. And then the other 0 is positive 2, so it would be x minus 2 would be the other factor. Because if I put negative 3 in there for x, I'd get 0. If I put 1 in there for x, I'd get 0. And if I put 2 in there for x, I'd get 0. All right, so these are conjugates. So if you want to do this the long way, you could. Otherwise, knowing that they're conjugates, remember we have a couple of shortcuts we could look at. One is that we would just multiply the first terms and the last terms since they're conjugates, because the middle terms, the other terms would end up canceling each other out. And 2 times 2 is 4, and 5i times negative 5i is negative 25i squared. But remember, I squared is negative 1, so that would be the same as negative 25 times negative 1, or 4 plus 25. The other shortcut is, since these are conjugates, just ignore the signs and just square the two values, the 2 and 5, and add them together. So 2 squared is 4, 5 squared is 25, and 4 plus 25 gives you your answer, which is 29. So when you multiply those two conjugates together, you just get 29. There should be no i's in your answer. And so what is a complex conjugate of negative 2 plus 3i? Remember, the value negative 2 stays the same. Don't take the opposite of negative 2. The only thing that changes is this plus is going to change to be a minus. So it'll be negative 2 minus 3i, which would be that option there. All right, so this one, probably one of the trickiest problems as far as the one involving the most work in this quiz. So we have 20 over 1 minus 3i. So the last couple problems we're dealing with conjugates, so it's kind of handy to have that before this one, because in order to simplify this fraction, we need to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. The conjugate is 1 plus 3i. Let's look at the denominator. Remember that trick we just talked about? If we just ignore the signs, just square those two values and add them together, we would end up with 1 squared, or 1, plus 3 squared, or 9, which would give you 10. So our denominator is going to be 10. And if I distribute the 20 through, we'd get 20 times 1 is 20, plus 60i. Now I want to write our answer in a plus bi form. So that means we're going to break this apart into two pieces. So we'd have 20 over 10 plus 60i over 10. Now you want to reduce those. 20 divided by 10 is 2. 60 divided by 10 is 6. We'd have 2 plus 6i would be your final answer. So lastly, we're going to go ahead and multiply these together. So we have 2x times x plus 2 times 3x minus 1. Now, there's a couple ways we could do this as well. Personally, I would just start by multiplying those together first. Okay, now if you want to do that using this box method, you could do it that way. Let me just show you. So we could put x plus 2 on one side and 3x minus 1 on the other. So we multiply those together, we would get 3x squared. And this would be 6x. Negative 1 times x would be negative x. Negative 1 times 2 would be negative 2. So when we combine like terms here, we would have the 3x squared would stay the same. 6x minus x would be a positive 5x, and then minus 2. And then the last step would be to distribute the 2x through. So you don't want to forget that. So when you do that, we would get 6x cubed plus 2x times 5x would be 10x squared, and 2x times negative 2 would be minus 4x. So when we put our answers in, I already have the x cubed, the x squared, and the x in there, so we just have to put in the coefficients, which would be 6. So we had 6x cubed, and then it was 10x squared, then it was minus 4x. I'm going to put in plus a negative 4x. And that's it. So hopefully that answers the questions you had for the quiz. If you do still have questions, just like normal, please make sure that you get those questions answered. Make an appointment with me. Stay in after the Google Meet is over. Come into my office hours before school or after school, and let's get that figured out.